There are apparently normal 6-year-old child presented with history of fever since 1.5 months, and it used to be present daily, intermittent in nature, high-grade fever, not associated with chills and rigors, no diurnal variations, responding transiently to antipyretics. So this is a fever of a prolonged duration, which is intermittent in nature and which is of high grade. They also give history of yellowish discoloration of eyes noted on 6th day of illness, which was gradually progressive, associated with high colored urine, yellowish.
You have not analyzed the first paragraph sufficiently. What is your analysis of the fever?
That it's a fever of prolonged duration, like 1.5 months,
Yes, agreed.
which is intermittent high grade type,
Okay.
and with variation. So basically, it's a prolonged fever, sir.
Yeah, so if it is a prolonged fever, what thoughts come to your mind?
So it's like a which is a it can be a chronic ongoing infection, or usually prolonged fevers can be because of inflammatory cause also. So at
Okay.
this point, it can be either chronic infectious cause or it is an inflammatory cause.
Suppose it is a chronic infection, what thoughts come to your mind?
Uh, Basically, like infectious causes like uh, rickettsial causes. If we only look at that, then it be a infectious causes like TB, viral causes like EBV, or it can be brucellosis, or it can be rickettsial.
Hmm.
Tuberculosis.
Yeah, that should come first, no?
Yes, sir.
That is the most common cause of prolonged fever in Indian children. Hmm.
So then we have what are the associated symptoms to localize the system if we can.
Okay. So one thing you have to always say that if the
Yes, sir.
fever is beyond 3 weeks, then the common causes of infection that we see in day-to-day clinical practice are all ruled out. What are the common causes? Upper respiratory tract infection, urinary tract infection, typhoid, common viral illnesses. All these things are ruled out. So this should be something, an unusual infection or an inflammatory process, or rarely it could be a presentation of a malignancy. A fever going on for 1.5 months, which is not subsiding and only gets better temporarily with antipyretics. Unusual or uncommon infections, inflammation, rarely malignancy. So that should be the analysis. If it is only fever, then this child comes under the umbrella of pyrexia of undetermined origin. But if this child has fever with other accompaniments, which can pinpoint to an organ system, then you can't call it a FUO. You will have to look at the organ system involved and then think of the other possibilities. Continue.
And the child had yellowish discoloration of eyes, which was noticed on day 6 of illness, which
Hmm.
was gradually progressive, associated with a high colored urine, yellowish discoloration noticeable in the skin also, and had a greenish tinge in the later course of the illness, and also history of pale stools present since 3rd week of illness.
Hmm.
So after 6
Hmm.
yes, sir. So after 6 day of illness, the parents have noticed there is jaundice, and here it is a progressive illness with high colored urine and a greenish tinge, indicating it's more of conjugated hyperbilirubinemia. And also there is history of pale stools, which suggests that there is the obstructive uh, pathology.
Hmm.
So most likely a conjugated hyperbilirubinemia secondary to obstructive
So
pathology.
it started as a hepatocellular disease, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
And
I
then it
follow it.
also had hepatocellular plus obstructive disease, which means that the liver cells have been so much involved and swollen that even the bile canaliculi have been blocked and therefore greenish tinge to the skin and pale colored stool. So this is a febrile progressive hepatotropic illness. So now we have confined ourselves to the liver and a progressive liver cell and obstructive element involvement. Okay. What is unusual here? Do you get such patients in the outpatient?
Usually they come with some other complaint along with the jaundice will be noticed. Initially
Yes.
noticing jaundice is
Yes. What is
and
the common mode of presentation of a child
usually
with fever and jaundice in the outpatient?
they present with fever, loss of appetite, vomiting,
Yes.
more like that instead of jaundice as a presenting.
No, no. Suppose they have jaundice. Not that they won't have jaundice. Some of them may have.
Loss of appetite, like they will have most common fever with loss of appetite.
Hmm. Anybody else? Zulfiyat?
Discoloration of urine, urine, high colored
Okay.
urine.
Okay. No, what I'm asking you is, what is the natural history of a child with fever and jaundice who come to the outpatient? How do they behave is my question. See, generally, children present during the first week without jaundice. They may present to you with fever, vomiting, lack of appetite, etc. etc. Jaundice usually starts off around the fifth day or sixth day, or maybe early second week. Jaundice worsens during the second week and generally settles down by the third or maximum fourth week. This is how common hepatitis sort of illnesses, hepatitis A, hepatitis E behave. Hepatitis B is less common these days because all children would usually have taken the hepatitis B vaccine either in government setup or in private, because both places this vaccine is very easily available. It's not expensive. Now the unusual thing about this child is that instead of resolving jaundice by fourth week, this jaundice has worsened by the fourth week. That means this child is not behaving like the usual hepatitis syndrome that you and me see in outpatient practice, and that is a red flag sign. These are points we would expect you to bring up when you present the history. A good number of children with hepatitis A don't even develop jaundice. They develop fever, little bit of vomiting, anorexia, and they tend to get better. But here is a child who developed jaundice on the sixth day of fever and continues to have jaundice, worsening jaundice since the past 6 weeks, or at least past 5 weeks, because the fever is of 1.5 months. Jaundice started on the sixth day. So this child is not the usual child with hepatitis infection. That is something that we should remember. Or this child might have started off with an hepatitis, but is not behaving like an acute hepatitis. Why will they do it? Why will they do? They can start off as an acute hepatitis, but they don't resolve like an acute hepatitis. Why?
So if there is any underlying autoimmune conditions get aggravated with the infective episodes.
So the
So
infective episode, as you rightly said, is a trigger. But there may be an underlying illness involving the liver, which will not make the child get better. How will you correlate that in day-to-day life? See, let us say you and your friend were walking, and
yes,
the third friend comes, and the third friend cracks a joke. So your friend will flare up and shout at the third friend who cracked a joke. But you don't think that so much of flaring up by your friend was necessary just because a third person cracked a joke. Correct? So the third person will get offended and go. Then two of you will be walking. So then naturally you will say, why did you get so upset? Because you didn't get upset. You didn't think it was wrong. Then your friend will answer, no, no, that person is always like that. Last time also he did like this. Have you not heard this? So abnormal reaction may be due to something underlying. You didn't react because there was nothing underlying misunderstanding between you and the third person. And therefore you did not feel the joke abnormal. But your friend had something abnormal or something underlying dissatisfaction about the person. So this joke itself made her flare up. So when something does not behave in the usual manner, there should be an underlying situation. So that is something that you will have to remember. That is number one. Number two, the usual disease itself may behave in a severe form. The hepatitis A itself can behave aggressively in some children. It may not be like the usual behavior in most children. Even that is possible. So the usual infection, but in a more aggressive form, or the usual infection which triggered an underlying involvement of the organ system which exacerbated the clinical symptoms. These are things that you people should analyze with this presentation. Continue.
okay. And also there is a history of vomiting, which started on 7 to 10 days after the onset, 2 to 3 times per day, containing food, which is non-bilious, non-projectile, no hematemesis, which is associated with the abdominal pain in the right hypochondrium, which is intermittent, colicky, lasting for about 5 to 10 minutes, not associated with any aggravating or relieving factors, and is non-radiating. So, since the vomiting, it can be a symptom of anything. Here, like non-bilious vomiting, which rules out that vomiting is secondary to any intestinal obstruction. It's a
Yes.
non-projectile vomiting. There is no CNS. Like if it's a projectile, then it could lead to CNS cause of vomiting. And also there is no hematemesis. Since there is involvement of liver, hematemesis would be a significant history, uh, like projecting a history of portal hypertension, and associated with abdominal pain in the right hypochondrium. It shows that it's like it indicates that pain can be because of stretching of the liver capsule whenever there is increase in the abdominal pressure during vomiting. So which is intermittent and colicky, lasting for about 5 to 10 minutes, and it's non-radiating in nature. So this basically localizes the vomiting is of hepatic origin, and that intermittent abdominal pain is probably because of the stretching of the liver capsule during the vomiting episodes due to increased abdominal pressure. That is why it's still uh, intermittent and colicky.
Hematemesis is a sign of
Like it can be because of like forceful vomiting also sometimes, but most commonly it's a sign of portal hypertension.
Always.
Any bleeding disorders also will cause hematemesis. And also if it is like if we are suspecting in terms of malignancy and all, that it's one of the bleeding manifestations of bone marrow suppression.
No, in this context, we are discussing the conditions related to the liver, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So
Yes, sir.
hematemesis in liver conditions can occur in two situations.
Portal
One is,
hypertension.
one is chronic liver disease. Chronic liver disease giving rise to portal hypertension. Number two, in the absence of jaundice history, hematemesis can indicate extrahepatic portal hypertension. Please remember that. So portal hypertension could be intrahepatic, much common, but portal hypertension can also be due to extrahepatic causes. So both can happen. In intrahepatic causes, signs of liver cell disease will be there. In extrahepatic causes, there may or may not be signs of liver cell involvement. Now that this child has presented with fever, jaundice, and vomiting, this child has got a hepatocellular disease. And in a child with hepatocellular disease, if there is no hematemesis, you are thinking that this child may or may not have gone into chronic liver disease. We don't know. If hematemesis was there, definitely it's a sign of chronic liver disease. Now that it is not there, we have to look for other features of either an acute liver disease or a chronic liver disease. That only when we do the clinical exam we will know. Yes.
And also there is history of abdominal distension present, which is noticed since 2 to 3rd week of illness, which was gradually progressive. So this indicates that it's a progressively evolving disease, and now like this abdominal distension, it can either be because of hepatomegaly per se or because of fluid accumulation also. So since it is on date 2nd to 3rd of illness, it more likely indicates it because of ascites. We don't know, sir, like what is it.
So how will
Here
you
in
differentiate? Suppose you were taking the history, the mother is in front of you. What you will ask?
I want to know whether it is a generalized abdominal distension or it is the whether upper quadrant is distended.
If the upper quadrant is distended, it is more of organomegaly,
Yes, sir.
isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And there is also a history of occasional pruritus present. It is because of the obstructive pathology. And 3 days before the admission,
No.
history of
No. Pruritus indicates what?
obstructive jaundice, stasis,
So,
cholestasis.
severity of obstructive jaundice. Only when there is severe obstruction, then you will get pruritus. Remember that there was a, what is that? Go to the jaundice part. Look at that. Yellowish discoloration with green tinge.
Yes, sir.
That green tinge indicates severity of jaundice. Plus now he has got occasional pruritus. So that indicates that the jaundice could have been quite significant. Otherwise, green tinge and itching will not occur. Okay.
And 3 days before the admission, there is history of passing of cola-colored urine.
Okay. What other history would you ask at this point in time?
Regarding the sensorium of the child, sir, is there any altered mental status or disturbed sleep pattern?
Okay. Very good.
And whether is there any history of weight loss?
Okay.
And like any other evidence of inflammatory pathology like joint pain or any rash?
Very good. Very good. So The extrahepatic manifestations you should ask. Very good. Like joint pain, skin rash, yes, conjunctival congestion, headache, all these things could be extrahepatic manifestations. Very good. Right.
And then I want to know whether there is any passing of melena
Okay. Agreed. What else?
and swelling of lower limbs.
That is a
That
little,
is
yeah, okay, you will ask, but
part.
usually in a liver disease, abdominal distension occurs first before the development of pedal edema. So if there is no abdominal distension, there can't be pedal edema. That is the way fluid accumulates, first in the abdomen and thereafter in the rest of the body. That's the way a liver disease behaves. Okay, what else? What other history will you ask?
Drug intake,
One is drug intake. Yes, agreed.
blood transfusions,
No, no, before that, will you not ask whether any other family members were affected? Generally, hepatitis is because of fecal-oral route. Some children may develop significant symptoms. Some children may develop mild symptoms. Adults may develop mild symptoms and settle down, though they have got the same illness. So ask whether anybody else in the family have had similar problems, though they might have settled down much before this child. Try to ask that history. Most often it is a fecal-oral route of transmission, both hepatitis A and hepatitis E. That is how they are transmitted. Chances of transmission through blood transfusion is a little unusual. How many times do we take blood transfusion? Very, very rare, no? But what is more common about hepatitis B is contaminated needles. If somebody has taken injections for illness in a place where you are not sure about the cleanliness or the sterilization technique, these are questions that you should ask the people. Sir, I am in a PG class, sir. Can I call you? Another, yeah, I am in a PG class. I will call you. I will call you. Yeah, I will do that. I will do that. Thank you. Thank you. So these are questions that you should ask. Or did they travel? Did they have common food somewhere? All these things will, I think I've told you my experience having gone to Kanakpura, no? I developed an acute problem and settled down, but my senior friend developed significant hepatitis E virus. Both of us got the same virus, but I managed to come out without much problem, but he developed a significant hepatitis. And he took almost 1.5 months to respond. So these, because he was much more aged than me, my immune system probably was much stronger than his. Okay, continue.
So there is prior to the 3 days before admission, there is history of passing cola colored urine, sir.
Okay.
It indicates now there is a renal involvement.
Okay.
Colored urine suggests that it is basically not a fresh blood. It's not from the lower urinary tract, from the upper urinary tract.
Okay.
Glomerular hematuria, which may be because of complications like hepatorenal syndrome. So this is what I thought.
Okay.
So, along other than that, there is a treatment history. Child was admitted twice for the above complaint and treated with ceftriaxone, amikacin, paracetamol, mefenamic acid, and silymarin. And also there is history of taking Ayurvedic medicine 3 days prior to the admission. So, if you have to think about drug-induced hepatitis leading to hepatic decompensation, like this is it's not prior to the onset of symptoms. Like it is during the illness period. So it is not because of drug per se, but use of hepatotoxic drug can worsen the uh, condition.
Like what?
Here, the drugs being ceftriaxone and also paracetamol in supratherapeutic doses and ceftriaxone and paracetamol. Amikacin and mefenamic are renal toxic drugs.
Okay.
And also history of Ayurvedic medicine 3 days prior to the admission. So if this is a history prior to the onset of illness, then we can think of uh, heavy metal poisoning like arsenic, mercury, or
Okay.
steroid-induced hepatitis. Like that.
Okay.
Past history, there is no history of neonatal jaundice, paleness, blood transfusion, abdominal pain in the past. Past history, there is nothing significant. It's not from the neonate. It's not congenital cause of jaundice here. And family history is a
Here,
non-consanguineous
yes,
history
in family history, you should ask about history of similar problems,
among the
history of
family
any
members.
history of any genetic disease, or history of any autoimmune diseases in the family. All three become important. Family history of hepatic disease, family history of any genetic disease, family history of any autoimmunity. All three become important. Okay.
And it's a non-consanguineous marriage, only child, no history of similar complaints in the family, no history of jaundice or abdominal surgeries in the family. So, uh, from the history, we can he's a 6-year-old child with complaints of fever, uh, progressive jaundice, vomiting, along with the signs of decompensation like abdominal distension and renal involvement. So, my probable differentials are like it's an infection with non-hepatotropic viruses like Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus, or herpes. That is one of the cause, or it can be because of inflammatory causes like autoimmune hepatitis. And third is one metabolic liver disease like Wilson, or rarely malignant.
Which malignancy are you thinking of?
Leukemia with metastasis or per se hepatocellular carcinoma.
Hepatocellular carcinoma is not very common in children. No? What are the points which are not in favor of leukemia?
There are no other symptoms or other cell line involvement symptoms, like no recurrent infections, no other bleeding manifestation, only non-specific symptoms. And no weight loss, no bone pain.
They are all the points which are not in favor of leukemia. In leukemia, the presentation is fever, pallor, bleeding. Here the presentation is fever, jaundice, and vomiting.
Yes, sir.
So gross jaundice is not a common feature of leukemia. Other manifestations are. Though in leukemia they could also have a hepatitis, the hepatitis may not be as severe like this in the absence of other clinical features of leukemia, like lymph nodes, bleeding, etc., etc. So they are much more common. Pallor is one of the, because the bone marrow is involved. No, the parents
Yes.
come with listlessness, tiredness, fever, pallor, and bleeding manifestations. This child has no bleeding manifestations at all. So less likely for it to be leukemia.
Okay.
Right.
So
Or
most common.
or
Okay.
it could be an acute exacerbation of a chronic liver disease. There is a pre-existing liver disease. Something would have tipped the balance of either a hepatotropic virus or some stress that has brought the liver problem to fore. It could be acute prolonged hepatitis. It could be an acute flare-up of a chronic liver disease, or it could be an acute manifestations of a metabolic liver disease not recognized so far. It could be an acute manifestation of an autoimmune disease which was not manifest earlier. The points not corroborating or the absence of significant extrahepatic features which have not developed so far, or it could be a manifestation of a metabolic or a genetic disease which was not hitherto recognized. Now, whether this is an acute liver disease or an acute on chronic liver disease, we will have to assess based on our clinical exam as well as biochemical investigations. Continue.
And positive findings on admission. The child had severe pallor, jaundice, hepatomegaly 4 centimeters below the right costal margin, which is tender, firm, sharp margin, left lobe palpable, and splenomegaly 2 centimeters along the axis, and it is firm and consistent.
Yeah. Analysis, please.
So the child is having severe pallor and jaundice along with tender hepatomegaly. Like that tender hepatomegaly indicates that it's an infectious, acute infectious etiology. So along with the child is having splenomegaly also. So it is basically hepatosplenomegaly with severe pallor. I don't know how to explain severe pallor.
Sir, can't it be some hematological manifestations like sickle cell or something
Possible.
with pallor?
But severe jaundice is not a manifestation of sickle cell disease. The sickle cell cannot involve only the liver. It has to involve all other areas also. No. Sequestration is not, the liver is not a place of sequestration. Spleen is a place of sequestration. The fingers, they are a place of sequestration. Wherever the capillaries meet. So he should have had left-sided upper quadrant pain involving the spleen. He should have had painful limbs. They are all not there, no? Where you will get sequestration, where there is pooling of blood, sluggishness of blood circulation. That is not there, no? Something you people are missing.
Left lobe palpable is here, usually in the hepatomegaly.
Okay. What does, okay, that is one point, yes. You people are not reading between the lines.
Firm in consistency.
Ah, very good. What else?
So this splenomegaly is a part of, it might be like a reticular endothelial system activation because of severe pallor.
Okay.
Not, or if it is, if we have to consider it as a hepatosplenomegaly, then it is a manifestation of infectious etiology like EBV, CMV virus, like non-hepatotropic viruses can cause hepatosplenomegaly, predominantly hepatomegaly.
Okay. Sulfiyat and Parvati. Open your microphones and talk now. Is Parvati there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, speak now.
Sir, I'm not getting anything else.
Pardon?
I don't have any new points, sir.
Think about it, you will get it. Sulfiyat,
Yes, sir.
tell us something more.
Sir, more, sir, it can be infectious, sir, but this firm consistency is not matching with that, or it can be autoimmune hepatitis also.
Okay. No, no, we will not discuss the etiology now. We will discuss only the clinical features. Etiology we will come later.
Okay, sir.
It is both tender and firm.
Okay. Anyway, I think you people have a thought block. Remember, in any hepatitis, pallor is not an accompanying symptom. They don't get pallor, that too severe pallor, in any acute hepatitis syndrome. The only place where they could get severe pallor with hepatitis or with a liver involvement is when they bleed. When they bleed massively, like the varicose bleed, then severe pallor will develop after the bleed. Here, there is no clinical evidence of bleed, but there is severe pallor. Whether this severe pallor is related to liver disease or it is not related to liver disease is something that we should think of. Now, in addition to severe pallor, Shweta said that there was a cola-colored urine. If we can correlate the two, cola-colored urine generally occurs because of intravascular hemolysis. So in the background of jaundice, if there is intravascular hemolysis, it can cause cola-colored urine as well as severe pallor. So there is a clinical condition where there could be hemolysis along with jaundice, and this can occur generally only in one clinical condition.
Wilson disease, sir, in
Yes.
hemolytic anemia,
Yes.
microangiopathic hemolytic.
Yes. So that is one possibility. Number two, look at the description of the liver. Every word is important. It is tender. All of you said if it is tender, it is because of acute enlargement. But a tender acute liver enlargement will be soft. You would have seen or palpated livers in typhoid fever. I'm sure you people would have seen a good number of typhoid fever children. And if you palpate the children's liver, it is enlarged, it is soft. All acute liver enlargements are soft. But here it is tender and firm. A firm liver indicates chronic enlargement. A soft liver will have smooth margins. Look at the margin here. It is sharp. A sharp margin will occur only when there is fibrosis in the liver. And a sharp margin always indicates chronicity. The left lobe of the liver is generally not palpable. If the left lobe of the liver is palpable, it indicates chronic liver disease. A firm spleen always indicates chronicity. So you have a chronic liver disease with an acute exacerbation with hemolysis causing pallor. That is the analysis of the clinical presentation. So this child has an acute exacerbation of a pre-existing liver disease. That is what the clinical features are telling you. Every word is important. What caused the acute flare-up, we don't know. And that is why, because this child had a chronic pre-existing liver disease, this child is not behaving like the usual child who gets acute hepatitis and settles down by 3 weeks or maximum by 4 weeks. And therefore, this child needs to be investigated. Now the question is, I will ask each one of you, you have to tell which tests you will do, why, and what are the possible results of the tests that you will do. I will start with Neeta.
Sir, first because all the examination findings, we are thinking like acute on chronic. So we can do a CBCs to see for the HB, that is pallor is there. So we can see the HB and WBC count to see for the infective pathology. And the platelet count also we can see. And then peripheral smear, in case we can evaluate the low HB or the severe pallor things. And the RBC indices, that MCV, whether it is microcytic or macrocytic, before peripheral smear we can see that. And then we can see the LFT, sir. Liver enzymes.
No, don't go to liver enzymes. You speak about CBC. Liver enzymes, let somebody else take.
Okay, sir. So we can see the this RBC indices we can see, and one idea we can get about the anemia part. What is the cause for anemia? And retic count if
Very
there is
good.
hemolysis.
Very good.
So,
Why did you not tell that first?
Sir.
Hemoglobin, PCB, retic count, peripheral smear should have come first.
Yes, sir.
Instead of RBC indices and other things, they are indirect evidences. These are direct evidences, no?
Yes, sir. Then
what is corrected retic count because there is severe pallor?
Sir, it will be normal if there is no indication of hemolysis.
No, how do you calculate corrected retic count?
That I forgot, sir. PCV.
Patient hematocrit by normal hematocrit or patient HB by normal HB multiplied by retic count.
Okay. I will go to Alphonse now. Anything else you would have done in the peripheral smear? Fever. You would have looked for malarial parasites also. No, is it? This child could have had malaria, he could have had hemolysis, he could have had hepatic involvement. Why a child with chronic liver disease should not get malaria? He has got fever of 1.5 months duration, no? Nothing is impossible in medicine, isn't it? Next. Alphonse.
Sir.
What is
Sir,
liver investigation?
Sir, liver enzyme sir.
Okay. Which liver enzymes you will do and how will you interpret the results?
Sir, enzymes will be elevated, sir. OTA, PT will be elevated usually.
Okay. Let us say in a child only OT is elevated, PT is not elevated. I told you earlier, OT elevated more than PT may indicate a non what? Non-alcoholic steatohepatitis which can occur in obese children. I have told you this.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Sir, GTT also can be elevated in obstructive.
Yes. GGT as well as alkaline phosphatase as well as 5-nucleotidase, which is expensive. All three will be elevated when there is significant infection, right? Continue.
Sir, then APTT PT also can be.
So what you will do a APTT or PT? Which one you will do? APTT or PT?
PT, because vitamin K dependent.
Okay. So what is the PT that you would expect here?
So long take. Sir, long take.
See, in any liver disease, the PT can be 3 types. Number 1, the PT can be normal. When the liver cell synthetic function acute insult is not very severe, the PT and the INR can be normal. Situation 2, PT can be abnormal, but if you gave vitamin K 1 to 10 milligram IV and did the PT can get back to normal, which means that there are some cells which still can be, you can it is not a uncompensated liver disease. You gave vitamin K, it got better. Situation 3, PT is abnormal, but even after you gave vitamin K, the abnormal PT did not come back to normal. That means this child has got a severe problem. So among the 3, where this child stands will decide the severity. So you should explain the prothrombin time very clearly. Normal PT, no intervention. Abnormal PT, you gave vitamin K, PT came back to normal or near normal. Abnormal PT, you gave vitamin K, still the PT is abnormal. That means it's a very severe involvement. Okay, next, Shweta. Oh, you are presenting, no? We will ask Zulfiyat.
Sir, hepatitis panel can be sent, sir.
Very good. Because you are suspecting an acute hepatitis, you will send for hepatitis virus panel. Point well taken. Okay. Next.
Next, to rule out autoimmune hepatitis, we can send ANA.
Before that, don't jump. We are still in liver function tests.
Okay.
Parvati.
Sir, ultrasound abdomen.
Ultrasound abdomen is not a liver function test, no?
Yes, sir. Sir, we will see the bilirubin levels and the albumin levels.
Why don't you tell that? Tell us about bilirubin.
Sir, this looks like a conjugated hyperbilirubinemia.
It's a mixed involvement here, isn't it? There could be a hepatocellular damage, plus there could be obstruction. So serum bilirubin is normal or abnormal?
Serum bilirubin will be abnormal, sir, elevated.
Very high, because the child has got greenish yellow jaundice and pale stool. Plus it could be a elevated conjugated as well as unconjugated. Why unconjugated?
There is
Because of
Pardon?
Hemolysis, sir, because of hemolysis can be
There
an
is an element of suspected hemolysis, isn't it? So it could
Yes.
be both conjugated and unconjugated bilirubin. Total bilirubin high, both forms of bilirubin elevated. Next,
Urine for urine.
don't go to urine. We are still in liver function test.
albumin levels, sir.
Albumin levels.
What will happen to the albumin level?
Chronic conditions, there can be hypoalbuminemia.
Correct. So you expect the albumin to be low. Yes. What will you assess along with albumin?
Globulins also, and albumin globulin ratio.
What will happen?
If there is an if we are suspecting it's autoimmune and all, there will be elevated globulins, and so that the ratio is also decreased.
Okay. Now you will have to explain it a little clearly. Albumin is usually how much? 4.5 or 4. Globulin is around 2. So total protein is about 6 grams, correct?
Yes,
Albumin is more than globulin, correct? No.
yes, sir.
Now, when there is chronic liver disease, albumin reduces because albumin is dependent on liver cell synthesis. So, albumin reduces. What happens to globulin? Globulin does not reduce. So, because albumin reduces, there is what is called as albumin globulin reversal. There is nothing wrong with globulin, but there is everything wrong with albumin because it is not being produced. So, though globulin is appearing normal, since albumin is less, globulin appears more. See, it is like this. Albumin is like a 5 centimeter scale. Globulin is like a 2.5 centimeter scale. So if you keep a 5 centimeter scale and a 2.5 centimeter scale by the side of each other, 2.5 centimeter scale looks smaller than the 5 centimeter scale. Now let us say albumin became 2.2. Globulin 2.5 centimeter scale next to albumin which is 2.2, then the globulin scale looks larger than the albumin. This is one situation. Situation 2, in conditions where there is a autoimmune liver disease, globulin level increases. How much? Generally, they say they will consider autoimmune liver disease when globulin increases to twice its normal value. What is the normal value of globulin? 2 to 2.5. What is twice of 2 to 2.5? 4 to
4.
5. So when the globulin level doubles its normal value, then you will consider the possibility of autoimmune hepatitis. If it is not autoimmune hepatitis, globulin appears high, but it is not above its usual value. If it becomes double the usual value, then you will strongly consider the possibility of autoimmune hepatitis. So please remember that. Next, anything else in liver function tests? We have discussed bilirubin, we have discussed the enzymes, we have discussed prothrombin time, we have discussed albumin globulin ratio. Remember, when there is an acute fulminant hepatitis, the enzyme levels will be 0, but the child will be very sick. So there are conditions where there is a severe liver involvement, but that is not reflected in the enzyme level elevation because of the nature of the involvement. If it is an hepatitis, yes, both are elevated. SGPT is elevated much more than SGOT. But if it is a fulminant liver involvement where almost all cells are involved, then the enzyme levels may not reflect the real clinical situation. Right? It is like the silent chest in acute severe asthma. When you auscultate, nothing is there, but the child is panting for breath. So that is the situation. So you will have to titrate the results of LFT to the clinical condition of the child. Okay, next.
Ammonia and lactate levels also we
Yes,
can do.
ammonia and lactate levels will indicate whether this child is going in for a fulminant liver involvement. You are right. Next.
And lipid profile also we can do, so
Yes,
like
you can do.
cholesterol level.
Yes, they are abnormal when there is a gross liver involvement. Okay. What is your next test?
And ultrasonography, sir, abdominal
Yes.
UST.
Yes. What will ultrasound tell you?
We can look at the echo texture of the liver and
Yes.
also whether there is any portal uh,
Yes.
portal flow
Yes.
and
When you do an ultrasound, you will look for 2 to 3 things. Number one, you will look for heterogeneity of the liver architecture. Usually, the liver architecture is homogeneous. It is not heterogeneous. So, heterogeneity of the liver architecture. Then you will look at the dimension of the portal vein. And then you will look at portal and other mesenteric area blood flow. If there is an obstruction, there will be less blood in the veins, but there will be more blood in the hepatic artery. Number 4, you will look at the inferior vena cava. Last time itself, I have told you that a good number of liver diseases can be mimicked by a clinical condition called constrictive pericarditis. So you will look for extrahepatic manifestations like Budd-Chiari syndrome. You will look for extra hepatic obstruction where jaundice is unlikely. Then you will look at the possibility of a constrictive pericarditis where because of backflow, the inferior vena cava will be congested and large. And then you will also do a Doppler ultrasound to look at the direction of blood flow within the vessels that I mentioned. Okay, next.
and then we can do urine routine, sir.
Okay,
Since we are having hematuria, then we can know whether there is
okay, agreed. Next,
bile salts, bile pigments, and
next.
specific etiological workup we can do, sir. Like
Yeah.
if you are thinking of unusual causes of infection, we can do EBV,
Okay,
and also here we are thinking of autoimmune hepatitis. We will do autoimmune panel
yes.
and workup for Wilson's disease by serum ceruloplasmin and 24-hour copper excretion levels we can do.
This is a 5-year-old child, 6-year-old child, isn't it?
Yes, sir. 6-year-old.
I am not able to see any one of you. All of you have offed your videos. Why am I telling this?
After examination.
Who said that?
Shweta, sir.
Very good. So take the child to the ophthalmologist for what?
To look for case of Fleischer ring.
Correct. How will you look for KF ring?
At the
Slit
junction
lamp.
of
No. How will
Assess-
you look?
Slit lamp examination.
So use a slit lamp to assess for Kayser-Fleischer ring. Okay, very good. Next.
liver biopsy also we can.
No, before liver biopsy. There are other conditions which can involve the liver, isn't it? Like cystic fibrosis, like alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, and rare genetic disorders. These are conditions that you will have to consider and see whether this child fits into all these conditions. Two important dictums are there. Dictum 1, any chronic liver disease is Wilson's unless proved otherwise. Number 2, in any chronic liver disease, rule out the possibility of constrictive pericarditis. How will you make out constrictive pericarditis clinically?
Chest pain.
ಅಲ್ಲಮ್ಮ ಎಕ್ಸಾಮಿನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಏನಿರುತ್ತಮ್ಮ?
Pericardial no.
ಕನ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಿಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಪೆರಿಕಾರ್ಡೈಟಿಸ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತಲ್ವಾ? See, suppose I hold your neck like this and constrict your neck, what will happen, ma? What will happen if I constrict here to your neck?
JVP.
Who said that?
Sir, Parvati.
Very good. So you will look at elevated JVP in case there is a suspicion of constrictive pericarditis, because there is no place for the cardiac filling, and obviously the JVP will be elevated. That you can pick up doing a cardiac echo very, very easily. You can pick it up. So these are the common clinical conditions that you should remember. Next. Next.
Next
See,
is liver biopsy. Finally.
Before liver biopsy. See, you can assess the extent of chronic liver disease or cirrhosis using 3 parameters. One is serum albumin, the other one is prothrombin time, and the third one is presence or absence of ascites. If the serum albumin is more than 3 grams, if the prothrombin time is normal, and there is no clinical ascites, it is grade 1. If the serum albumin is less than 3, if the prothrombin time is prolonged, and if there is no ascites, it is grade 2. If serum albumin is less than 3, prothrombin time is grossly prolonged and there is fluid in the abdomen, it is grade 3. So looking at 2 biochemical and 1 clinical parameter, you can assess the extent of cirrhotic process that is going on within the child's body. Yes, go ahead. Continue. Somebody was telling something else now. Some test you are telling. Which is the next? You said liver biopsy, no?
Yes, sir.
Who said that?
Shweta, sir.
Yeah, go ahead and explain. You are right.
Sir, That we can assess Wilson's disease also by looking at the copper in the liver.
Yes. Yes.
Also,
No.
in case
Okay, no.
hepatitis.
Please don't jump into an answer. You are
Okay.
a final year postgraduate student, right? Before you did
Yes, sir.
an invasive test, you have to qualify whether this child is fit to do that test or not, isn't it? You just can't poke a needle into the child's liver, no?
Hmm.
Hmm. So how will you know whether this child qualifies or not? See, this child qualifies for a liver biopsy, but whether it is feasible for you to do it or not is the question. You got my point?
Yes, sir.
Tell me now.
So first we have to rule out contraindications for liver biopsy, like if there is any active bleeding.
How will you do it? Whenever you do a liver biopsy, you have to do the prothrombin time. If the prothrombin time is prolonged and that prolonged prothrombin time is corrected by giving vitamin K, only then will you attempt to do a regular liver biopsy. If the prothrombin time is not corrected, then the other option you have is to do what is called the transjugular approach to do liver biopsy. You can't do the usual way of liver biopsy. That's the requirement. Then you go ahead and tell us about liver biopsy. Continue. Anyway.
And we have to look at the platelet counts also.
Yes.
For the same reason.
Yes.
And we have to identify the proper site prior to the biopsy.
Okay. Now, when you did a liver biopsy, earlier we were looking only at histopathological assessment. No longer. Nowadays, we do the histopathology as well as the liver tissue is sent for biochemical investigations also. Like what Dr. Shweta said, there are special stains which will stain the copper content of the liver. So, liver biopsy for histological assessment and certain etiologies may present with a certain type of liver histology. So, the etiology could be assessed by histology and the etiology could be assessed by the biochemical tests that are carried on by using the liver tissue. Both you will have to look into. I understand there are more than 5 to 6 stains to do the liver staining after they do the liver biopsy. So Shweta, you will go to Dr. Aneet and talk to her about staining, histopathological staining of a child with chronic liver disease and put it up in the group. What are the stains used and which stain is used to diagnose which disease? And if Dr. Aneet will tell you the characteristic features of histological changes on liver biopsy in particular disease, put it up tomorrow.
Okay, sir.
Right. Next. Next, what will you do?
Then etiology specific treatments.
In the investigation, Mugdil wala. There are certain genetic diseases which can manifest with chronic liver disease. For example, not Wilson's, but genetic copper metabolism dysfunctions. And then you would like to do a genetic study of the child as well as the siblings and the parents. And then there is something called an auto-inflammatory liver disease, and you would look at reasons why there is auto-inflammation. So these are all the other investigations that you would like to do before you arrive at a conclusion. Please remember that at times before you did the liver biopsy, you can catch the etiology. The classical examples are autoimmune liver disease as well as Wilson's disease. Because if you did a ceruloplasmin level which was found to be low, and if you did a urine copper estimation, gave penicillamine and did the urinary copper estimation, and you found that there was an exponential increase in urinary copper estimation elimination after D-penicillamine, then you have reasonably arrived at the diagnosis of Wilson's disease. Same is the investigation for autoimmune disease. I think I have discussed this earlier. I won't do it. So if you are able to find out the etiology before liver biopsy, then you can as well start treatment without going in for the liver biopsy. But if you can't, then liver biopsy becomes necessary both to assess the etiology as well as the prognosis. Because if there is a cirrhosis of the liver, then the prognosis will be only better if you plan to do a liver transplant. Otherwise, the prognosis will not be very good. So liver biopsy helps to identify the problem, helps to assess severity, and also gives you some clue regarding the long-term outcome of this child and the interventions that are necessary. Yes. Continue. Sweta,
Yes, sir.
anything more?
Then we have to monitor for complications in those children.
Yes, yes. Okay,
Other
I
than
think,
that,
yeah.
mm,
Please
yes,
read
yes, sir.
about chronic liver disease, read about Wilson, and I think I have told you earlier that the classical manifestation of Wilson's disease generally depends on the age of the child. Younger the age, hepatic manifestations are more likely, like this child. Older the age, neurological
Neuropsych.
manifestations are more likely. So age determines the mode of presentation of Wilson's disease. And like this child, they may not have any manifestations earlier, but the first manifestation itself can give you clues to say that this is not an acute liver disease. This is a long-standing liver disease with acute exacerbation. And here with severe pallor and cola-colored urine, you have to strongly suspect the possibility of Wilson's disease. So age determines the presentation in certain diseases. So you should be very familiar with it. How to manage a chronic liver disease like Wilson's, autoimmune liver disease, alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, etc. Read up, and Zulfiyat will tell me autoimmune hepatitis. Shweta will tell me Wilson's disease, and Parvati will tell us about manifestation of alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency management. Next class, prepare slides, 2 to 3 slides, and discuss. And I think Alphonse will tell us the general management of chronic liver disease. With that, I think we will stop here. I have shared the case with you. Be prepared for that case. Next time, I will decide who will present, which means all of you who are there should come prepared, whoever I tell has to present the case. Any questions? Shweta?
Yes, sir. No, sir.
Right. Sulfiyat?
No, sir.
You want a cup of coffee? Okay.